Today we're going to be covering the future of retail. My name's Sam. I'm with Deputy Software. With me I have Ken Penkala from Ace Corporate. Deputy is a cloud-based workforce management solution that is indeed trailblazing the transformation of the future of retail and retail tech stack. So, quick background on me. Before Deputy, I was a police officer for 4.5 years. I came into Deputy and I was able to figure out the solution. I say that because it's really not rocket science. The system is built to be intuitive, user-friendly, not intimidating, from configuration to implementation to daily use across all user levels. Okay. I started with Deputy on the small medium business sales team and worked successfully with a lot of small to larger individual retailers and retail chain operations in the implementation of Deputy as a solution. But my approach to selling wasn't as textbook sales as you might think. I actually approached my customers with more of a service and support-based mindset, which I found well as I transitioned to be an enterprise account manager with our strategic accounts. So now I work with companies like Ace Hardware to consult on and help implement our support our workforce management solution for their franchise locations to aid in helping their retail locations transition into the future of retail. So that brings me to our corporate partnership with Ace Hardware. We've been fortunate enough to come to an agreement with Ace Corporate to be their preferred workforce management vendor for their franchise retail locations, and we're happy to have Ken Penkala today with us, a consultant on Ace Corporate's store systems and operation teams. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Ken to introduce himself, and then we'll go ahead and get started with kind of the fireside chat that we have planned for you.
Well, good morning and good afternoon to everybody that's joining today. Once again, my name is Ken Penkala. I work at Ace Corporate here in Oak Brook. I have the distinct pleasure of working on kind of a unique team. Some of you guys have interacted with myself or some of my colleagues in our team, but the store systems and operations team that we have here is made up of around 12 people, all the way from Eric Webb, who is our director, Bob Levesky, the people management manager, Alan Whitman, who's the inventory manager, kind of breaking it down from there. But we have a unique ability. We spend a lot of time in the retail field working with you, the retailers, store managers, associates, and our goal is to help streamline what you guys need to do on a daily basis in the stores, as well as writing best practices or AWAR documents, but really tailoring to you guys to make sure that we're simplifying things from a retail perspective. So we do spend a lot of time with other departments here at Ace Corporate when there's new initiatives and new programs that are rolling out, and we work to ensure when they're getting down to you that they're going to work in the store level. Now, sometimes we don't get incorporated into all the different projects that are going on that get rolled out, but we try and get our hands on as many as we can. I work on the people management segment of the store systems and operations team. So workforce management, new Deputy partnership is one of the main programs I work on. I also work with Paycom and Shopper Tracker, the main 3 programs that I work on. I'm the liaison. I work with Sam and Vivek from Deputy on a daily basis, weekly basis, helping you guys out, make the transition and how we can make it better. And we'll elaborate on some of the projects that we're working on from a long-term perspective. So Sam, I'll turn it back over to you to keep things rolling.
Great. Yeah. Thanks so much for that, Ken. That was a great sum up of kind of our partnership thus far. We're doing some really cool things as we progress with that partnership, and we'll definitely touch on those later in the presentation. We're kind of moving into some questions for Ken, as he has a ton of experience in the retail space. One of the things I wanted to start out with is, I know paying extra for unworked hours really is just one of the issues that employers struggle with. I know you've been in the retail business for a while. What are some of the biggest pain points you've experienced over the years in retail with this specific issue?
And I'll kind of touch on what I've seen with my time with Ace and then my previous 21 years of frontline retail experience being a store manager for Dick's Sporting Goods, for Target. And really, both companies, when I worked for them 10, 15 years ago, had more of a simplistic based manual scheduling process, time clock process. And really, we spent a lot of time on wasted little workforce management tasks. We didn't get a chance to really analyze our performance on a real time data that we could pull and say, hey, this is what I scheduled for the week. This is where I'm trending. I'm already trending 40 hours or 10 hours over for the week. Where is that coming from? And really trying to make some impact with the staff. I mean, think about the staff when you have a manual process, whether it be Excel or even a clunky scheduling tool that may be automated, where the employees don't have the ability to impact their schedules and get somebody to cover their shift automatically or offer a swap shift. Some of those things that leads us into kind of the future of retail when we start talking about employee engagement and employee retention with our workforce. We have a diverse workforce. There's a large delta in our stores from our very experienced retired plumbers, electricians who are very valuable, all the way down to your high school or college kids who need that technology aspect, and looking at the millennials and the zillennials and the iGens, and really how we need to impact that. And we're going to use technology and mobilize our associates from that perspective. And so in-store systems and operations, when I look at my programs, what we've really tried to do is looking at how do we reduce these pain points? How do we make it easier for you guys in the retail world? I don't want you spending 6 hours writing a schedule, whether it be on an Excel-based platform or on a very clunky computer system that's old, antiquated, outdated. We want to make it simple and easy, and that's some of those things that Deputy really gives us from a technology standpoint. And it really helps us, when we started looking for a new workforce management, when we decided to move away from our previous, the first thing that I did is put together a 26-person retail input team that was made up entirely of some of the previous vendor users. I pulled some of our people pros, but they were human resource managers, owners, store managers, back office people. And we invited them to be a part of every step of the request for formal presentation of the RFP process. And we really, instead of saying, hey, this is one we think is best from a ACE corporate, we really relied on that retail input team. And the ultimate decision was to move with Deputy because it is the right workforce management software for us, based on its user interface, navigation, the features that it gives us, and its ability and long-term growth strategy.
Yeah, that makes sense totally. And kind of listening to you, I heard you say the kind of the buzzword of the workforce management tech stack today, which is automation. And automation, can get dangerous if you don't, like you said, you have the clunky user interface. So you have to be careful. You have to balance the intuitive user interface with the automation to make sure that it's usable across all different employee or employer personas. So that's great. Well, great. Moving on. Speaking of technology, what are the important technologies retailers need in order to have a complete tech stack for the future of retail?
From our perspective, we're working on a lot of different avenues from ACE Corporate, and especially in store system operations. We have one person on the team, Tim Klaus, who he is the technology guy. He does a lot of the credit card. He's working on the gift card changeover project right now. But his main goal is really to think about, okay, by 2025, what is our team going to look like in the stores, and how do we give them the technology that's important? And that's going to be through a lot of different avenues. It's going to be through systems like Deputy, recruiting tools with Snag, using an automated payroll process where you can streamline and transfer data between systems. That's one of our goals. Is future state, it would be hire somebody in Snag, their data would flow into the LMS system, into Deputy. If you're using Paycom, into that system, they would do all their time and attendance in Deputy, and then it would flow right back out into Paycom from a payroll perspective. So I think that's future state, that's what we want, but that's only part of it. We also want to talk about, I'm sure some of you guys have seen the new Zebra devices that we launched last year, about a year ago at the Chicago convention. That's going to be the device of the future, and the goal for that is really not so much for the owners to have, or owners or managers to have that and run around with it. It's really for the associates. Give them access to Deputy, give them access to the slew of mobile apps that we're working on that you're going to see roll out over the next 18 to 24 months, whether it be updated and ordering apps, different apps from accessing, acehardware.com. So if I'm an associate and I'm not up on my electrical department something and I have a question, I can hop on to acehardware.com with that Zebra, pull it up right in front of the customer. I can read through it. We can look at it, make sure it's the right piece. And I think that's part of the puzzle. And it obviously looks different from, larger chain stores to single stores. But I will tell you, a lot of the basic technology is going to work and does work. We've seen it. Even with Deputy, we've got a couple larger chain stores somewhere in the realms of anywhere from 5 stores, 8 stores, 13 stores. And we've got lots of singles, lots of, 2-store chains on Deputy. And I'll give you some frontline feedback from last week when we were in the Pacific Northwest Retailer Summit, or PAC Northwest Summit. I talked to a single store retailer who's been on Deputy for about 2 months. She's like, it's saving me hours a week just in my time and my associates' time. And then we talked to the larger, they have 9 A stores, and then they have 3 additional. They have a corporate office and a couple non-A stores that are also using the system. And their biggest feedback switching from our previous vendor to this was, it's super easy. The store managers are understanding. The user interface or user experience is amazing. It's not overly complicated. It's saving us time. And they're able to customize it to their store's needs. Because as you guys know, we have a huge delta between our stores, whether it be a single store or multi-chain store, or even within a multi-chain store. We have lots of diversity, a huge delta, how people do things differently, whether it's I do cashier, management, sales floor, those are my departments, or if I do cashier, paint, electrical, plumbing, service, and break it down to that granular, routine. Deputy does this very well and allows us to customize it to your needs from location to location, chain to chain, and to your needs.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for that, Ken. One thing I picked up when you were talking there was the word time, right? Time is obviously a huge, that's money. Time is money in the retailer's world, right? And, what Deputy does well, kind of in the time space, obviously inside of the system, there are a lot of things that decrease the amount of time you need to do from a day-to-day management perspective. But additionally, it can plug into other systems, right? When it does do that plug in and data transfer to other systems, that also reduces the amount of time that you have to manipulate the data that comes from Deputy to plug in, right? If it can just directly communicate via an open API or via a spreadsheet that's formatted properly for your system, that also reduces the amount of time for your external processes from Deputy as well. So great for that. Great comments there. For any store, what does it mean to onboard an omni-channel strategy?
I think the word omni-channel can be a little bit overwhelming or cumbersome to really deal with or understand. But in the current retail landscape and how quickly it is changing due to many different large big box retailers, whether it be Target, Walmart, Amazon putting huge pressure on a lot of brick and mortar stores. From an omni-channel perspective, we really need to start looking at, again, kind of circling back when I was talking about giving our associates those Zebra devices or a device where they can access different apps that are going to help the customers on the spot, so they're not running to the front of the store or to the back of the store for a computer, but really creating that seamless process. And I forgive me, I cannot remember the number. I want to say it's somewhere near 78% of customers that were surveyed in a recent survey around, do they see a difference between the website and a brick and mortar store? So, if we looked at acehardware.com and then Ace Hardware Store, there is no difference from that. There is, to them, it's the same. It doesn't matter that I may go to my local Ace in Arlington Heights, Illinois, and that one's different than my local one that's in Buffalo Grove. They're owned by two different retailers. Both stores are run very well, but for 78% of our customers, there's no difference between that online experience and what they experience in store. And so that omni-channel, again, is incorporating those technologies, whether it be our BOPIS process, our BODFIS, buy online, delivery from store, all these different initiatives that we're working with. And as we progress and develop Deputy, that's going to allow us to better arm you guys, and so you guys can schedule more based on actual data and figures and numbers. So we're not flying blind in that, because we are just starting to learn those processes, introduce those into the stores. But really, it's about conducting business from any device in the store and giving that power to your associates, to your managers. And that's something that Deputy does very, very well, from a time management, task management, communication platform, and just an overall workforce management platform.
Yeah, that makes sense. So again, kind of looping us back to that time perspective, the supervisor's time is valuable to get back onto the floor to make sure, employees are effectively trained. Employees' time is valuable so you can facilitate good customer service, and having that omni-channel strategy can facilitate that. So that's great. That's great insight. Thanks for that, Ken. So I guess it kind of brings me to another point. Does that mean that everybody in the retail industry is or should be quick to adapt to this new technology?
And from my perspective and looking at, my previous experience, previous lives and transitioning into ACE, I don't say you definitely don't have to run for the hills and do it. That's really that's the beauty of our co-op model. We want our retailers to do things as they need to, as they want to. And we do have a large delta between our retailers, our owners, our managers. We have some that are, first generation owners. They do things, they've always done it this way. That's going to be a longer transition into technology, into your systems. And we have some retailers who are cutting edge, who go out and find new technologies on their own, whether it be testing driverless cars for deliveries from the store, and interior analytics, where it's pinging your cell phone and you can actually track where a cell phone walked, how long it was in the store, and some of those technologies. So Deputy falls into that. From our goal, our first goal is to get as many of our retailers and our stores off a paper process when it comes to workforce management, because during our labor study last year, it's roughly what we saw from the stores we were in, which we were in about 18 stores across the country, different markets, tropical, Northeast, Northwest, Midwest, rural, urban stores. Across the board on average from a workforce management perspective, and that includes poor scheduling, just time spent doing it. We're wasting roughly about 23 to 26 hours a week on those workforce management tasks. And I think with Deputy, we can really change that. We can make it a lot easier, streamline the process. So, I say you don't have to run out and do every single thing of technology that we're offering, but I think as things roll out, you need to take a serious look at it. Because as we can continually see the landscape of retail changing, and it's drastically changing, you need to start adapting to that. You need to start looking at what are the first steps, and those are things that we can, from a store systems and operations, that's part of our process. Is yes, we go out and find vendors, we develop preferred programs, we offer great pricing, half off, 3/4 off of what you normally pay. With the vendors, but our goal is to offer those to you guys. But then if you have questions and thoughts, you can reach out to any of us on our team in store systems and operations, and we're more than happy to sit down and kind of walk through that. Same with our professional retail services or the PRS teams. We're doing some revamping on the trainings that they're going to be doing. There's going to be some new things coming out from them in the coming months, which is really cool and exciting. But, we understand that some stores may be doing the same thing they did 15 years ago, 30 years ago. Our goal is to give you the solutions, make them available to you, create a value for it, so that you're willing to look at it. But at some point, there is that point where it's like, okay, we need to start jumping in and using technology, because that is the way, it is the future of retail.
Yeah, that makes sense. Kind of digging into that, you said some folks are hesitant, whether they're not tech forward or technology might intimidate them. How do you get everyone on board, even if they're hesitant in trying something new, technology specific? How do you get the retailer, the franchisees, the store owners, how do you get them on board?
So I think obviously the way we started the whole, I'm going to use Deputy as an example, and we'll kind of work on that. But I would say just starting with what's being used in the field. I mean, before we even reached out to Deputy from an ACE corporate perspective, there was, I want to say somewhere between 20-ish stores already out there. They'd gone out and found it and was using it and had very positive feedback from that perspective. I think really getting that word of mouth from a peer-to-peer standpoint. So doing some return on investment studies, doing some great case studies and showing the value of it. Hearing the great feedback, last week at the Pacific Northwest, I'll be in Montana next week at the Great Falls dealer meeting as well, talking to some current users that are out there. I think we can share the savings on not just time, savings on money. I think one of the other ones that doesn't always carry a lot of weight, but one of the nice things is, if you think about it, if you're saving time from a manager perspective, an owner's perspective, that allows them to get back out on the floor and really spend time, keeping our helpful promise and helping customers, or training and coaching their associates so they're doing that, and staying, keeping the store to, great standards. But I also think from an employee standpoint, you improve your retention because you have that interaction capabilities. With Deputy and even some of our other technologies, they can access their information from anywhere with a smartphone device. They can look at it. They can request time off. We've also seen a direct correlation that the happier the associates are and more engaged the associates are, the better the customer service is in that building. And having an all-in-one system that does, everything from time clock to payroll export creates that all-in-one system where you're not missing that, somebody writes down, hey, I need, August 25th off. They put it on a Post-it note because you're using Excel, and they stick it to your monitor. Well, 2 weeks later, that Post-it note probably fell down behind your desk. You don't see it. You schedule them. They've got to come to you. And it kind of creates this snowball where you're spending 30, 45 minutes fixing an error, where when you have that easy all-in-one system that allows the associates some capabilities of swapping shifts, offering them up because they've got last-minute things, and kind of put it on them, it allows the employers, the managers, the owners to really, again, circle back, be on the floor, help drive customer service, create more leadership, coach and train and develop their teams.
Yeah, that makes sense. Kind of transitioning, focusing on the employee, kind of employee-centric here. Why is it important that retail store owners, why should they think about how technology impacts the work life of their employees?
Well, I think we have to think about it, and I don't think we do. Even with some of the big box companies I worked for, but even with ACE, I think we tend to think about inventory as the most important thing that we have in our buildings, which I don't necessarily agree with, but I also think we need to start reviewing and thinking about it, that our employees are probably our most valuable. They're one of the most expensive aspects of running a store from a wage perspective, and especially with all the different compliance regulations, fair work week, predictive scheduling, wage increases that are going on. But they're the biggest factor. If you don't have a team in your store, you're probably not going to be very successful at helping your customers or selling a product. And that ties into everything. And I think, again, like we talked about it, as our associate base becomes younger, whether it's more millennials, iGens, Zillennials, we need to have that technology aspect because they crave that. They demand it. That's what they want. And it's not just from a scheduling perspective. It's about, a really cool thing with deputies, we can assign task lists and task duties for them on a daily basis. There's communication platforms that are available and that are very easy to use. If you're using an Excel or one of the legacy systems, there's no employee engagement in those systems besides them taking a picture of it on their cell phone, which then I almost guarantee that 25 to 30% are calling the store at some point because they can't find the picture to see when they work and doing that. With some of the newer technologies, including Deputy, the stores have access, or the associates have access at any time. They can really utilize that, and that drives engagement. And the more you guys use the task management and the communication platforms that are available within Deputy, that drives your engagement. We're rolling out a big initiative from ACE Corporate from an employee engagement survey perspective. There's a big push over the next probably year and a half where we're really going to be talking about that. And it's not an easy topic. It's a challenging one, but those are some of the things that we've gotten from the pilot stores where they don't have, if they're not using an automated system and they're on Excel or a legacy-based program, that's some of the big frustrations for the younger demographics. And really increasing that staff engagement, it not only increases your staff retention, if they're happier and they're more engaged and they have access and they feel like they have some ownership, but even in the scheduling process or even in their department, if you have those people where you break everybody down departments and they always work those certain areas of the store, give them the technology. If you get the zebras and they have that and they can go through and scan their outs quicker and place their orders quicker, that's going to improve engagement. And again, going back to employee engagement, the higher the engagement, the happier the associates are. We definitely see a direct correlation with customer service being much higher. As well, then that leads to what everybody really wants, is selling more product, having more profitability at the end of the year.
That makes sense. Yeah, obviously it's important to take care of employees because employees are the face of your business. And it's apparent to me after working with ACE retailers from the corporate perspective all the way down to the employees and the managers, the boots on the ground. It's apparent to me that ACE has a phenomenal culture, right? So kind of going in that same vein, but transitioning to more compliance, state or city mandated compliance. Something that's becoming a trend across the country is what we call predictive scheduling or fair work week. You can see kind of the trend here. There's some nuclear effects. So while you may not be directly affected by this now, I can say this started in California and New York and Oregon. These compliance laws are kind of branching out, and that's really the spirit behind this, is to take care of the employee, to make sure that they have proper notice before their shifts, to make sure that employers are not changing the schedule last minute, to make sure they have a predictable income. It's becoming more and more common about this discussion as it continues to spread across the country through new laws and regulations stemming from this fair work week concept or predictive scheduling. What does this mean for retailers, and how can they make sure they're staying compliant with this?
I think that's a very complex and challenging question. From a co-op model standpoint, from an ACE corporate perspective, I can't really say, hey, do X, Y, and Z. But I can tell you, speaking generally about compliance and kind of hitting on what you just spoke about and looking at the current state across the country, there's more and more going into. In fact, there was just a bill passed by the House last week about a federal minimum wage increase to $15. It's not expected to pass the Senate, but it's being talked about. So you can see that along with the predictive and fair work week schedule, the increases in wages across the board, compliance is becoming a huge risk management perspective. If you don't understand the law, you're not compliant. Now, I would say, with our cultures in our stores, we usually have very good cultures, and the associates, work with the owners and they understand it. But there's a lot involved in that, and I think understanding that is really key and becoming important. And I think a tool like Deputy, which again has the compliance that is there, it's not going to make you follow the compliance and rules and regulations. It gives you many warnings. You do have the ability to circumnavigate and go against that compliance. But I think having the tools and making it more visible, that's one of the big starts. But I think also partnering with a human resource consultant or firm or a lawyer firm and running through some other key points is just having an up-to-date handbook, really understanding that piece of the puzzle. You can see here what the law entails. There's a lot to the laws. It's very different. And this is kind of a high-level overview. It's different from state to state, even city to city within a state. There's some different things. I know, for instance, even here in Chicago, the city council is going to be doing a vote, I do believe, next week on a fair work week scheduling policy in the city of Chicago, which is going to make things challenging because we don't really look at that or understand it. And it seems very simple, but it's actually much more complicated. So tools like Deputy really help us utilize that and make sure we're following it, but it's also up to us as the retailer to really follow that piece of the puzzle. And I think creating schedules in advance, I think that's always been a challenge, even in previous lives working in big box. Our goal was always to have at least minimum 2 weeks out scheduled. It can be challenging at times. We understand that, but that's if you want to talk about predictive, scheduling, that's one of the keys is you have to have a minimum of 2 weeks scheduled, posted, available for your associates to see. That's like a huge thing. And I've had some associates in the past that I've worked with where I was a day late and it was the end of the world for them. So it is important to the associates and making sure we stay up on that and have a strong routine around that. Regular breaks and regulating the breaks, making sure everybody's taking their required meal policies, whether it's state dictated, and there's different rules from state to state. Illinois is completely different than Michigan. Michigan's different than Washington. Washington's different than California. And the other key piece is really being fair with the opportunities from a work perspective. And I think from my being in stores and really spending time with different retailers, I think we're really good because when we get good people, we want to make them happy. So we really are very flexible when it comes to that. But that is a key component of it. It really is making sure that if you have 5 part-timers that, for the most part, based on availability and the business needs, they're getting a pretty equitable balance of the hours. Same thing with the full-timers, But again, there are some key things that play into it. If their availability is extremely restrictive, that's going to have an impact on it. And there is some compliance room within those compliance labor laws, but at the same time, that's why we say partner with a law firm, partner with an HR consultant, make sure your handbook's updated, use a system like Deputy because Deputy updates it on a quarterly basis for your state, local laws, and it's going to tell you if you're doing something you shouldn't be doing from a compliance standpoint, and it'll help remove clopenings, so, minimum hours between shifts, things of that nature. Some of those basic functions, the system has that built in. You can override it. That's your decision. But from a compliance standpoint, it's only going to continue to grow and spread across the country. Sorry, that was a rather long-winded answer there, but it's a very elaborate, that could be an hour to 2 hours of its own webinar by itself.
Oh, absolutely. And, I was out there with you, Ken, at Pacific Northwest Summit. We had, we Deputy partners with a law firm that helps us with these features. And we can't say we guarantee compliance, but we are a tool to help you with compliance and how you interpret it. And then, at that summit, we had that law firm, Littler Law Firm, come out, and they spoke to the local and state and city labor laws, and there was probably 45 minutes worth of questions that we had to cut short because they were on a time limit. And I think we could have kept going for the next hour and a half, 2 hours. So yeah, Deputy has a lot of features that can aid you in the path to compliance. All right, thanks for that, Ken. Yeah, so kind of switching gears, this is a question that's on everybody's mind. While I was purchasing something from my couch on Amazon.com last night, a big question in the world of storefront retail is with the rise of large online retailers that promise 2-day delivery or even quicker. How should storefront retailers or storefront store owners position themselves to stay competitive?
That's That's a rather, again, kind of a rabbit hole, if you will. There's lots of different things that we can do. Obviously, again, as you pointed out, Amazon, Walmart, Target, we've jumped on board with, buy online, pick up in store, or buy online and delivery from store. We have stores that have jumped on board and really taken advantage, and we've seen some huge increases, some great average transaction sizes in those stores. That's part of keeping our helpful promise. We don't have in the future, we're not going to have the ability to rely on just the people walking in our buildings. Yes, that's the majority of our business, but we also can't leave the omni-channel avenues that we can't leave those markets untouched by Ace Hardware. So that's why where acehardware.com becomes very important. The buy online, pick up in store, the delivery and assembly options that we offer. Yes, certain things, they're always going to have to come into your store. I need this color match for my son's paint that we bought 3 years ago. He loves this color. He wants it to be matched. Yes, he's going to come into your store. If I need a particular washer for a Delta faucet that I got 10 years ago, yes, I'm going to need to come into the store to figure that out. But there is that market where we can, and we have the capabilities to really access it. Buy online, pick up in store, buy online, delivery from store. Some of those functions that we're opening the avenues to and expanding really are going to provide us with even more opportunities. So that customer that may not have come into your store, if they do that buy online, pick up in store, we actually see that there's an additional attachment rate. They come into the store, they get helped by one of our associates, and they're keeping our helpful promise. They actually buy additional items on top of what they bought online, picked up in store. So it's not only driving our e-commerce business or omni-channel business, it's also driving the in-store brick and mortar. And then that's an opportunity to really grab hold of them and say, hey, you need anything, come talk to me or come talk to any of the associates. We've got this helpful promise. Now, when you look at it from a technology standpoint, that all involves technology, but then where Deputy really comes into that piece is how do we have the right staff at the right time to help those customers that are coming in for a BOPUS? How do we arrange our buy online and delivery from store process, our delivery and assembly process, and really driving that aspect? The funny, not the funny part, but the truth is we need to continue to grow that and develop that within the Deputy system, and then utilize systems that give us that data so we can schedule correctly to the business needs. And I think that's where it's going to be key, because with the big businesses with the same day delivery or next day delivery, we've done different things, even like the CPO process for you retailers that have that ability from your RSCs. That's been a huge win for us, but it's really about, there's going to be a certain amount of people that we capture through omni-channel and e-commerce. So it's really when they're in the store, if we get that interaction time, making sure we've got the right people so that we capture them and get them wanting to come back into the store and ask us questions and help us, meet us helping them do what they need to get accomplished in their houses.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. In that, you're talking about doing things to stay competitive, kind of the future of what our partnership is going to consist of in order to leverage that. So in reference to that, the future of the ACE Deputy partnership, what, from your perspective, are we looking to accomplish over the next 2 years with our robust system?
Yeah, so I think, from my perspective, when we first started the whole RFP process, we started with a meeting where we sat down with some of our retailers and even internally and just said, what are our goals when it comes to workforce management? Workforce management, WFM, whatever you want to talk about, is really everything from your time clock, time and attendance, request management, accrual management, payroll exporting, scheduling, advanced scheduling, forecasting. That workforce management encompasses that whole piece of the puzzle. So we're like, what do we really want to have our goals be? And so we sat down and came up with 3 main goals for workforce management. And, our first one is pretty simple, pretty basic. We estimate somewhere around 50 to 60% of our stores are still on a manual or paper process in some aspect when it comes to workforce management. So our first goal is pretty simple. We want to move stores from paper workforce management to an efficient, productive, and all-in-one system. That's our goal. That's really what we want to do. That's the direction we want to move. That's step one. Just getting you guys into an all-in-one system that's easy to use, that works well, that saves you guys time in the stores. That ties into goal number two, which is reduce the time spent on workforce management tasks. And so when I say that, a lot of people think of just about scheduling. It's not just the scheduling piece. If you're on a paper process and you've got a binder for request time off for your associates, and then you've got another binder, a spreadsheet that does all your accrual tracking, and you got to check and make sure that, Jenny, who just put in for a week's vacation, does she actually have that accrued for the year? Is she going to be negative? Where's she at with that? And the call-offs and, spending 20, 30 minutes calling different associates to come in and try and cover that shift, or, swap shifts where you forget to make the changes to the schedule. There's quite a lot of tasks that fall into that. So it's not just the scheduling piece, it's that overall. And I think from the feedback the stores that are using Deputy currently have started off so far, is that's where they're seeing a lot of the savings. And then the ultimate goal, and this is more of a long-term goal, is scheduling to demand and increasing our labor productivity based on sales units and transactions, possibly foot traffic as well, whether it's through shopper track or another form. So that's the three main workforce management goals.
Great.
And then from how are we going to do that? Really a couple things that are going on and that I want to share. And some of you guys have gotten communication, have gotten the communication from us. We've got three larger projects going on right now. One of us is a point of sale integration. So we're currently working with Deputy to send stores that are using Deputy. We're going to be sending over their point of sale data, and that would start with a 2-year history download. Again, sales, units, transactions, even refund dollars broken down into 15-minute increments. That would be sent over, so it'd be visible in the system. So as you're writing your schedule, you could actually see when your sales peak and when they go down. So that's our big first project, and we're hoping to have that done sometime. Hopefully by the show, it may go a little bit later. We've had a couple of delays on some things, so hopefully end of September at the latest. Also simultaneously working with Paycom, who's our preferred HRS and payroll vendor, to develop an API feed. So data would flow into Deputy. When I say data, employees' names, addresses, emails, job codes, wage rates would flow in automatically into Deputy. And then as we're closing out our pay periods, you'd simply export your time cards, select Paycom. The data would slide over to Paycom. You'd go into Paycom, verify, process your payroll, and make things very simple. And then our third one for this year is what we call engineered labor standards. So that's where we get into the third goal for workforce management when we talk about scheduling to demand, increasing labor productivity. That's where we get into that piece of the puzzle, because that's where it's going to take that sales data, that point of sale data, and we're going to create basically an algorithm that's going to say, okay, this is how many associates you need. This is when you need them. So it goes back to that, the right people at the right time, to help our customers really drive that piece of the puzzle. And then if you really think about looking at the next 2 years going into 2020, there's going to be some new initiatives. You guys, if you're going to the show in Atlanta, we're really going to be kind of pushing that out at the Atlanta show, kind of what's next, or higher ground past 2020 and some of those new initiatives. And, we've got a new LMS system that'll be rolling out in the near future, if you haven't heard about that. And that's another integration that we want to work with, so that we have training information and data flowing into Deputy from the LMS. So somebody completes their cashier training and they do their learning plan, and it updates in Deputy and it gives them the training, and it reduces the time you guys are spending on manual processes. And there's going to be even more. There's roadmap things that Deputy has plans just in the system that'll update, and will automatically get those updates from that perspective as well. So there's a lot of things, but we want a seamless process when it comes to people management. And that, like I said earlier, perfect world, we'd have snag a job would flow into the LMS would flow into Paycom or Deputy or both, and then vice versa, Deputy flowing, payroll data into Paycom. So it's one time touching the data, and then it all flows seamlessly. So then you guys don't have to spend, time entering somebody's data into 2, 3, 4 different systems. So that's the long-term goal, and that's that's the future state that we're looking at.
Great. Yeah, I think that was, through this whole talk, you crafted a great picture of ACE's vision for the future of retail. So that was great. Thanks, everybody for joining. I know Ken has about 5 or 6 minutes left. I have the same. There is that Q&A box. We're going to stay on for another 5 minutes or so for some questions. We do have one question that's open now. It sounds like it's a deputy-specific question, so I'm going to go ahead and field it live. So the question is, if you can't see it, is if we don't use physical clocking in devices in the store, I deputy call it the kiosk, how do we ensure the employees clock in the store and not on the bus on the way to work? That's a great question. So as far as deputy is concerned in that realm, we have location addresses built into the system. That address is recorded on a Google Maps overlay. So when an employee clocks in from their mobile app, they'll punch in and it'll actually tag their geolocation when they punch in. As the manager or employer, you can actually set up a geofence around your location to alert and flag the timesheet if somebody's punching in when or where they're not supposed to. So that's a great question.
Hey, Sam, real quick on that, I just want to also just give my perspective for 30 seconds is, so it's kind of a common question that we get, and Deputy does give us, as Sam just talked about, it does give us a lot of different avenues of it. And again, from a technology standpoint, it's going to transition. So if you start off just using the desktop or just the kiosk, we always have the capability of transitioning in between the mobile punching application and geofencing. We have a lot of capabilities, and we do have stores that are out there using it with little issues whatsoever. So I know it's one of the big questions where there's a lot of fear, but with the technology, which is what we're talking about now, really limits and excludes the capabilities of people being fraudulent and taking advantage of the system.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. It's great to get other perspectives from internal deputy versus external. It's great. Great perspective. Another question we have is especially a product-related question. When are we going to be able to add training hours to a scheduled shift to show up on a printed schedule? That will include what we would like to refer to as micro-scheduling that is on the product roadmap. It is currently not available. What you'd have to do at this point is to put 2 separate shifts on the calendar, which we did print out for that employee as 2 separate shifts. But great question.
Yeah. Sam, real quick on that one too. And that's what I've seen a couple of stores, they've actually created a training area. And exactly as Sam just said, you put the first, 7 hours of their shift in their normal work area, and then the last half hour or 40 minutes, you move to that training area. That's another way to really notate it on the schedule so they can jump on board.
Yeah, great. Another question. What are some ways to get employees engaged using this new tech? How do we get employees excited, get them on board? I guess, I'll go ahead and pass that over to Ken as he's kind of the person in charge of that on the ACE side. So.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things that we talk about here from using new tech like workforce management. And there's always going to be a change in management when you're going from what you're currently doing or current state to a new state. But I think it's really understanding the benefits, and if you're not seeing that from the start of it, is really sitting down with myself or Sam or Vivek's, one of our other point of contact, is really sitting down. We can walk you through what we're seeing. We can get you in contact with a few other retailers that have been using it, that are using. There's a couple testimonials on the AceNet homepage from Bobby Hauser out in South Carolina. We're working on a couple other case studies that hopefully we'll have out in the next month or so. But along with that, it's not just the new technologies, it's also what you're doing in the store. From your hiring process, your orientation. Orientation is completely different than your onboarding process. Orientation is interacting, getting them excited, telling them what your store, what your culture is, how you're going to help them grow and develop, how you're going to train them. But really, and we've seen some stores that have really had some struggles with getting some of our older associates to understand technology. And those are the ones that you really just need to handhold and say, okay, this is what we're doing, because It's good for 95% of our associates, and it's better for our business. It's going to help us control a lot of different things, whether it be overtime control, just scheduling in general, make better schedules, all that piece, and really hand. And then at some point, and I'll be blunt and honest, from a best practice and from an industry standard, if there's people that just refuse to do it, then it's like, if they can't jump on board with some of the technology and you've given them many options to really access it and understand it, I mean, to an extent, they're going to be a detriment to your business, and that's where you need to make those decisions. But it's really showing the associates the whys behind how the technology is going to help them, and getting them training as well.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. Thanks so much for that. Next question sounds like a tough one. I'm going to also give this one to Ken, as you're the expert in ShopperTrack, but I'll read it out loud for everybody. The question is, I heard you also work with ShopperTrack. Do you use the traffic data to help create schedules, or do you use the other metrics primarily when creating schedules? How do you balance labor efficiency with meeting employees' needs for consistent hours? For example, traffic dictates you need more people at closing and not necessarily in the middle of the day.
So currently the plan is to have our point of sale data, which again will be our sales units transaction, be the main data inputs to really guide both our labor forecast. ShopperTrack or a traffic counting system is something that we'd be looking at in the future, probably 2020. Because again, we also need to quantify how many people coming through the door. What does that equal from a labor standpoint, and how do we integrate that with the point of sale? And the nice thing with Deputy is our ultimate goal is to have demand-based scheduling. John Van Huysen has talked about this for years, is having bottoms-up, demand-driven schedules. With Deputy, we're going to put the data there for you. You can run it, look at the data, but you guys can do what you need to. If you need to follow different things, that's entirely up to you. But we want to show you guys and get that data in front of it, so at least you have a guideline. At least you have some reference points, where currently most of us do not have the ability. We don't have that reference point for the most part.
Yeah, I think Ken, what you're referring to, engineered labor standards, that's kind of a phase 3 thing with the partnership goal here, is to, once we get that sales data being pumped into your account, where they're going to work closely with Ken and the rest of the folks at ACE to build in those labor standards. So it's just a kind of a point and click thing in Deputy to build that schedule based on those demand metrics that we've come up with through those labor standards. So it's a great question. Thanks for that, Brian. We have about 2 minutes left. There's no more questions in the queue. Again, this recording will be emailed to everybody who registered. Our contact information is on the screen now. Feel free to reach out to either of us, or you can respond to the email that the recording comes out from. But we really, really appreciate your time today. Thanks so much for joining. If you're not using Deputy currently, we would love to have a conversation with you. If you are currently using Deputy and have some questions, we're here to help. Other than that, we hope you found this webinar helpful, and we look forward to continuing to help you and other retailers move into the future of retail. Thanks so much.